Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. Always appreciative for all the support. Hopping on this Friday, and I will post as soon as I'm done here. Obviously, you're now seeing it. Update on the Packers defensive coordinator gig opening job. And since I posted the original video a couple days ago that I had talking about some of the top candidates, there's already been a couple that have been plucked off the board. You have Christian Parker, who was interviewed by Green Bay, landing in Dallas as their defensive coordinator, and we also know Brian Flores, who was my home run hire idea, albeit a far-fetched one. He's either going to be a head coach or will go back to the Minnesota Vikings as their defensive coordinator. And wanted to hop on today because there was an interesting discussion that was had on ESPN Milwaukee on the Wilde and Tau show earlier on Friday, where Rob Demovsky said he doesn't think anything happens until Matt LaFleur can talk to Jim Leonhard. And there's a timeline here where that could get pretty dicey and pretty hairy for Green Bay, to the point where you wonder, like, is it worth waiting around for Jim Leonhard? Now, I said in my original video, Jim Leonhard, strong candidate, could be up for other defensive coordinator openings this cycle once the season comes to an end, whenever that is for the Denver Broncos. But I did wonder aloud, if Jim Leonhard wasn't born and raised in Wisconsin, if he wasn't a Wisconsin Badger, if he didn't coach on the Wisconsin Badgers staff and was an interim head coach for a little bit there, if there were no Wisconsin ties, would there be as many Packer fans clamoring for Jim Leonhard to be the guy for this defensive coordinator opening? Again, I'm not discrediting the resume for Jim Leonhard. I just was wondering aloud, if there weren't all these ties to Wisconsin specifically, would there be as many people in the fan base for the Packers wanting Jim Leonhard to land the job? And I wonder about that. And I also am a little hesitant because if you remember back in 2021, Jim Leonhard interviewed for the job, the defensive coordinator opening that Green Bay had at the time, talked with Matt LaFleur and the rest of the brain trust, whoever was involved in those interviews, and it certainly seemed like it was Jim Leonhard's job, like it was on a platter for him to take, before he pulled his name out of consideration pretty late along in the process, noting that he just didn't believe it was his time or the right time to jump to the NFL, and so he remained at Wisconsin, which, if that is actually how it played out, completely fine, completely understandable. But it does plant that seed in your mind, like, could that happen again? Could the Packers wait around here for Jim Leonhard, wait for the Broncos season to end? And again, we'll talk about that timeline because it's not as glowing for Green Bay and their prospects if they do want to wait for Jim Leonhard. Basically, if the Packers want Jim Leonhard to be the next defensive coordinator, they want the Denver Broncos to lose this Sunday to the New England Patriots. But is there a risk in waiting around and talking to him, interviewing him, thinking maybe he has more interest in the job this time around, and then could he, pull the rug out again and say, no, and get cold feet and stay in Denver, or entertain other potential openings? So there's a risk within that as well. But Rob Demovsky said he does not believe anything happens on the defensive coordinator front for Green Bay until Matt LaFleur and the Packers can talk to Jim Leonhard. Now, as you wait day by day and even hour by hour, the good thing Green Bay has going for it is when you think about the defensive coordinator openings, and ESPN actually did an article where they ranked them, and they put the Packers at number one. When they talked about defensive coordinator openings, what is the best one, the most enticing one for potential candidates, they put the Packers at 1, San Francisco at 2, Chargers 3, Giants 4. But there's so many other openings. The Commanders, the Dolphins, the Jets, the Ravens, the Titans are all looking for defensive coordinators as well. And I mentioned 2 names already. We already know Brian Flores is going to be a head coach or go back to Minnesota. Christian Parker is in Dallas. He's going to be their defensive coordinator. And as these candidates get plucked up quicker and quicker, because, we've already seen, where a lot of these teams are a week or 2 or 3 weeks removed from their season ending, those vacancies are going to be filled. And it could dwindle down the list for the Packers if they're just waiting around on Jim Leonhard. So to me, there is a risk in waiting for Jim Leonhard if you're the Packers, because all these other candidates, a lot of them that maybe you want to interview, have already interviewed, like a Jonathan Gannon, like a Durante Jones, could end up saying, I'm not going to wait around. I have this job offer. I'm going to take it. We're still, Raheem Morris is another name, like waiting to hear, does he want to stick with coaching? Could he land the Arizona Cardinals job? Defensive coordinator, broadcaster, like what direction is he going to go, because there's ties with Matt LaFleur and Raheem Morris. But on the Jim Leonhard front, if I understand it correctly, I believe this is correct. So the Denver Broncos, Jim Leonhard's a part of that staff, they play the New England Patriots Sunday in the AFC Championship. If Denver wins and advances to the Super Bowl, there's a 7-day window that opens up where coaches on that staff for Denver could interview for openings. However, if I'm understanding this correctly, the Packers have not yet interviewed Jim Leonhard, and there was a first window of availability to get those first interviews done with members of that staff and other staffs who are still alive, like New England, the Los Angeles Rams, and, of course, the Seattle Seahawks. Because the Packers didn't interview Jim Leonhard during that first window because Jeff Hafley had not taken the Miami job, my understanding is the Packers will have to wait until after the Super Bowl to talk or officially interview Jim Leonhard if Denver advances. So you're talking about having to wait weeks if Denver beats the Patriots on Sunday. So if the Packers are interviewing these other candidates, and I'm sure it's justified in a genuine interest that the Packers have in Jonathan Gannon and Durante Jones like they had in Christian Parker, and we'll see on Raheem Morris and potentially some other candidates that maybe we haven't even heard about. But if they're waiting around for Jim Leonhard, it could take weeks. And by that point, you're really pushing the chips into the middle of the table, kind of going for broke, hoping that you can convince Jim Leonhard to come be the defensive coordinator of the Packers. And so I think there's an immense risk in that. And some of it isn't the Packers' fault. Like, it just so happened during that first window when you could interview these candidates for playoff teams that Jeff Hafley hadn't taken the Miami job. And so Green Bay wasn't interviewing anyone for a defensive coordinator opening that didn't exist at the time. And now that second window is available for these coaches next week for whoever advances to the Super Bowl. So coaches on New England staff, Denver, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Seahawks, whichever two teams advance, there's a 1 week window, but they're for second interviews. And so that's where it gets a little dicey for the Packers. That is my understanding of how this all works, that the Packers could have to wait until after the Super Bowl to talk to Jim Leonhard, which is on February 8th or something like that, if Denver beats New England. And so to me, there's an immense risk in waiting for that one candidate who it sounded like you wanted in 2021, did the interview, his job to lose by all accounts, and then he pulled his name out of consideration late along in the process. So we'll have to see. Again, it's just, I keep using that word, dicey. If Matt LaFleur has a hunch, somehow like a pretty convincing hunch that Jim Leonhard will take the job, by all means, wait. Now, is he the best candidate in this cycle? That's a completely, subjective topic. Jonathan Gannon was the defensive coordinator for the Eagles for a couple years, called the plays for the defense, took over the Arizona Cardinals head coaching job, only lasted a couple years, was not calling the plays for the defense for Arizona. He's already been interviewed, twice by Green Bay. Durante Jones, who has worked under Brian Flores, he is similar to Christian Parker when it comes to a fascination standpoint for me, in that, Durante Jones is much older than Christian Parker, but Durante Jones, outside of being the defensive coordinator at LSU for one season, I think it was back in 2021, he's never been a defensive coordinator in the NFL, but he's worn a lot of hats, had a lot of jobs, highly respected, and he's worked under Brian Flores the last couple of years in Minnesota. And if he brings any of that aggressiveness, tenacity, that blueprint that Brian Flores has in Minnesota, which is a defense that I mentioned in a video a couple days ago, Vikings have had pretty damn good defenses year in and year out under Brian Flores. If I'm not mistaken, it was 4th in points per game allowed last year, 7th this year, 1st in blitz percentage this year, 1st in blitz percentage last year, top 5 in quarterback pressure rate, both those seasons, even dating back the other one with Brian Flores, because he blitzes so much. He's aggressive. He keeps his foot on the gas. I thought Brian Flores would be just a perfect fit as an alpha, as a dog for the defensive coordinator spot for Green Bay, and that it could have sort of a trickle-down effect maybe to the rest of the coaching staff. However, he's staying in Minnesota. However, Durante Jones has been interviewed by Green Bay, who has worked under Brian Flores these last couple of years in Minnesota, and he's an intriguing candidate because if he brings any of that stylistic approach, even though he hasn't been a defensive coordinator yet in the NFL, neither has Jim Leonhard, right? And so I'd be increasingly intrigued by the prospects of Durante Jones, but again, it sounds like the Packers are going to, and Matt LaFleur are going to wait to see what's going on with Jim Leonhard. And to me, there's just that risk of time passing by, especially if Denver wins on Sunday. Then you're really, really, really crossing your fingers if you're the Packers and you're content with waiting until after the Super Bowl, because remember, it's not conference championships, then the Super Bowl. It's conference championships, a week off, and then the Super Bowl. And so you're really stretching it out there if you're Green Bay, hoping that you can land Jim Leonhard. You're putting a lot of eggs into that basket. Mentioned he's never been a defensive coordinator, but there's all the Wisconsin ties, the fact that he interviewed in 2021, and there were reports, stories you can look up from 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, that clearly indicated Matt LaFleur and Jim Leonhard like hit it off, like they thought it'd be a perfect fit in Green Bay. Many people did. And so I'm just interested to see what way this goes. You know, I'm kind of just sitting right on the fence as far as if Denver wins on Sunday and Green Bay does wait until after the Super Bowl so it can talk to Jim Leonhard. We all now understand the risk in waiting around. Like Jonathan Gannon could end up somewhere. Raheem Morris could end up somewhere. Durante Jones could end up somewhere by the time all that has passed, or as before that moment, you know, comes to be. But if the Packers truly have that gut feel that they can get Jim Leonhard, I'm okay with it. I'm not going to be up in arms about it. Now, if they wait around for Jim Leonhard, all these other candidates get scooped up, or a lot of them get scooped up, a lot of the top ones, and Green Bay waits around for Jim Leonhard only for him to say, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. Then I'll be a little more pissed off, and I think a lot of people will be. But I'll trust this with the Packers until it comes to its finality, right, until it reaches the final stage. I'm okay with whatever direction they take. I'm not going to, you know, pound my fist on the table saying you can't wait around for Jim Leonhard. It's too risky. And I'm not going to say don't, you know, wait around for Jim Leonhard. He's the best candidate out there. I'll just trust whatever Green Bay goes with here while laying out to you, like I did in this video, the risk in waiting for Jim Leonhard, which is if Denver wins on Sunday, it doesn't become a disaster for the Packers, but it becomes a lot more stickier of a situation to try to navigate and figure out, you know, what buttons to push. The best case scenario for the Packers is the Broncos lose to the Patriots on Sunday. They can talk to Jim Leonhard as early as Monday and figure it out from there. If Denver does win the AFC Championship, it becomes a lot more foggier of a picture for the Packers. And you have to also think about these other candidates. Durante Jones is interviewed for the Packers gig. Jonathan Gannon has interviewed for the Packers gig. Again, waiting to hear some clarity on Raheem Morris and what he's planning to do. And there's plenty of other names still available, but there's also plenty of other defensive coordinator openings. I mentioned the Niners, the Chargers, the Giants, the Commanders, the Dolphins, Jets, Ravens, Titans. These candidates, they're smart guys. They're not morons. If there's no conclusion to Green Bay's opening and Denver wins on Sunday and there's no conclusion to it next week, these candidates are going to be like, oh, they're clearly waiting for Jim Leonhard. I'm not even the first choice for Green Bay. Let me go look at my other options that are on the table now. Green Bay can't expect all these candidates to wait until they get to talk to Jim Leonhard and then go back. They'll be viewed as like a fallback option, right? And that can rub some of those candidates the wrong way. The thing Green Bay has going for it, as I mentioned, is you look at some of these outlets like ESPN and you listen to what Fowler saying and some of these people on NFL Network. The Green Bay defensive coordinator job is a highly coveted one, in large part because it'd be pretty damn cool, right, to be able to coach Michael Parsons, Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, Devontae Wyatt will be back healthy, Edgerrin Cooper. There's a lot of studs on that defense, and of course it starts at the top with Michael Parsons. We'll see how it plays out. Let me know what you guys and gals think, too. Do you want the Packers to wait around for Jim Leonhard? Right now, if you're watching this on Friday or Saturday, you're probably like, yeah, wait to see if they lose on Sunday, and you can talk to them Monday. It's not that long. If the Broncos win on Sunday, and you have to wait till after the Super Bowl, are you still content with the Packers waiting to talk to Jim Leonhard? Or at that point, would you be like, go, you know, figure something out with Gannon or Raheem Morris or Durante Jones, or again, some of these other candidates that are out there that exist as well? It's certainly a fascinating time and an interesting decision that Green Bay will have to make. And I just decided to hop on and do this video based off Domofsky saying he doesn't expect anything to come to the forefront until Matt LaFleur can talk to Jim Leonhard, which if Denver wins on Sunday will be quite a long time. Let me know what you guys and gals think. Click the subscribe button. Takes 3 seconds to do so. Costs you nothing. Helps me immensely as I build up the channel. Super grateful to have over 1,000 subscribers on the channel. Let's keep building it up. Let me know what you think in the comments, too, about what direction you want to see Green Bay go with the defensive coordinator opening. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. We'll see you next time.